Good evening and welcome to Copperfield's Books virtual event with Deborah Madison and in conversation with Rachel Khong. My name is Jamie Madsen and I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator here at Copperfield's Books and will also be your host for the evening. Copperfield's Books has been committed to literature, education, and creating community together since our founding in 1981. I'd like to take a moment here in the beginning just to thank all of you for supporting us through COVID-19. This events program actually wouldn't be possible without that. So we at Copperfields are very, very grateful. And just a couple of housekeeping items before I introduce our guests. I will be using the chat box to provide links to view upcoming Copperfields events, details for purchasing tonight's title, as well as previous titles by Deborah. And we'll also include my email address for follow-up information. Additionally, for those of you interested in signed copies, Deborah has sent in book plates. So we'll touch on that later in the event, but something I'm excited about. So tonight, the Q&A box will be your go-to with any questions or comments for the speakers. The format will feature between 35 to 45 minutes of speaking and will be followed by a live Q&A. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see an icon that says Q&A. Please submit your questions here rather than replying to my post in the chat box. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce tonight's author, Deborah Madison. Deborah is the award-winning author of 14 cookbooks, have received 4 James Beard Foundation Awards and 5 awards from the IACP. In 2016, she was inducted into the James Beard Foundation Cookbook Hall of Fame. She currently lives in New Mexico. And in conversation with her tonight is Rachel Khong. Rachel is the author of the novel Goodbye Vitamin. From 2011 to 2016, she was the managing editor and the executive editor of Lucky Peach magazine, and she currently lives in San Francisco. They are with us this evening to discuss Deborah's memoir, An Onion in My Pocket. I know all of us are so excited to dive into this. So I'm just gonna straight hand it over to you, Rachel. Why don't you take it away?
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm just holding this book up in case you haven't purchased it yet from Copperfields. I'm so honored to be here tonight in conversation with Deborah Madison, who is one of my personal favorite cookbook authors, and in my opinion, a living legend. So I'm so happy to be here and to be talking tonight about Deborah's beautiful new memoir. And I really loved reading this book, but I also hated reading it during a pandemic because this book made me want to travel so badly and to eat at a restaurant and to share food with people. And I thought we could just start at the beginning, Deborah, and talk about where this book began for you. Was this something that you had wanted to do for a long time, like write a memoir, or was it something that came later from someone?
Well, it came later. It started 15 years ago, actually, because I received writing fellowship to Hedgebrook for a month. And at that time, I was so concerned that I hadn't gotten a PhD in anything, and I thought I could be more useful in the world if I did. Anyway, I went to Hedgebrook and I wrote, and then I went to Ireland for 2 months because my husband had a fellowship there, and I wrote there. And a year later, when I reread what I had written, I hated it. It was so moany, groany, and it was so awful. And I thought, surely there's something in my life that means something more. And I decided to figure out what that was over time, but it took a long time. And I wrote a few books in between too, as usual, because you brood and you think about it and you go back to it and then you discard things. And I mean, at least that's what the process was for me.
Are you a keeper of a journal? Were these memories that you had written down, or did you sort of revisit them later?
No, I have never kept a journal. I'm terrible at that kind of thing. But I have, since I finished the book, found examples of things I had written, and they're so much better than what was in the book, I thought. And it was kind of like journaling, you know, I'd be in back east someplace in a hotel, and I'd write about something, and, you know, and I thought, gosh, why didn't I use that? It's lively, it's better, it's good, you know, but I didn't. So there you have it.
There's so much ground that you cover in this book, you know, from your life as a Zen Buddhist to a chef at a popular restaurant to a cookbook author, of course. And in your introduction, you talk about starting to cook for other people at the Zen Center and kind of just learning to cook there, really. And there's a line where you say, it's supposed to be so austere, that Zen life, but people still have to eat and someone has to cook. That person became me in 1970. And I really love that line, people still have to eat. You know, even if you don't care about food, you have to eat. And I think what your memoir makes really clear is that, you know, caring about food makes life richer. So I wondered if we could talk a little bit about where food first started mattering to you and then later cooking.
Yeah, sure. We can try to talk about that. I remember that so well, that it wasn't about austerity. And although a lot of people link that my first sashimi meal, which was very austere, it was just rice and miso soup and pickles. And I mean, you know, I've always felt food should taste good. It should be good. It should draw people to the table. It should draw conversation out, and, you know, and all those wonderful things that food does. When I took over the Zen Center kitchen, I inherited a macrobiotic kitchen, and I actually liked the food because his stews were so deep and so wonderful. But I realized that not everybody wants to eat that way and likes that kind of food at all. So I had to change it and to bring people to the table together to share meals. So I started introducing cheese and eggs and coffee and, you know, things that we hadn't had, baking powder to make the pancakes a little bit less like shoe leather. And, you know, and that was interesting. It was fun actually to do that. But, you know, I think the way we first started eating was probably better for us in some respects, but I felt it was important for us to all eat together and enjoy our food. And I never saw anyone turn down an enchilada or a plate of lasagna or chocolate cake or, you know, cinnamon rolls on Sunday morning.
Was it partially that that was the kind of food that you wanted to eat, or you were just trying to make people happy?
I don't know what I don't even remember what I wanted to eat. Like I said, I liked the cook that came before me. I liked his food, but I realized that a lot of people would leave the kitchen and go down to a restaurant 2 blocks away to have breakfast because they could have what? They could have scrambled eggs and toast and hash browns and coffee and read the paper and smoke a cigarette and maybe even have bacon. I don't know. But I just felt it was important for those people who were largely senior students to eat with everybody, you know. But given that, we had a kind of hodgepodge menu. I mean, one morning we'd have muffins and scrambled eggs and, like, you know, coffee and so forth. And the next day we'd have miso soup and rice cream. I mean, it was like back and forth for a long time.
Through the course of your career, you've seen the landscape kind of really change as you write about it in the book. You know, you talk about how things like arugula and fingerling potatoes and goat cheese we kind of take for granted now, but back then they just weren't an option. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about just how vegetarian cooking changed, or vegetable cooking in general, and then, you know, how you decided to approach cooking vegetables.
Well, there are two issues there. There are vegetables and there's vegetarian cooking. Vegetarian cooking was pretty awful because we didn't know how to cook. I mean, no one had learned, and nobody had a mother or a father who could, demonstrate, through their own interest in food, a healthy way of eating. I mean, in the 50s, if you remember, well, you were probably not even born then, but I mean, right after World War II, all these conveniences were introduced to our mothers who probably loved them. Mine couldn't afford them, so we didn't have, TV trays and that kind of thing. But I know that they considered that such a treat. And then at Zen Center, we wanted to turn more to whole foods. But nobody knew how to cook them. No one had eaten them before. There was no example even. So yeah, it was stodgy at first. But we got a lot of our seeds after it got going from Seed Savers Exchange. And I love talking to younger audiences because they think, oh, well, you can get that at Trader Joe's. You can get goat cheese. You can get this. You can get that. The other thing. But there was only one Trader Joe's when I started. And they certainly hadn't heard of arugula, let alone triple washed in a bag and so forth. Or fingerling potatoes or golden beets or Kyogia beets or any of those things. I mean, it was all brand new, and it was even brand new to some of us. I bought seeds when I was in Paris and took them home, brought them back with me, and our gardener planted them out, which was very generous of her. And so we were able to start with lots of unusual foods. Or they're not unusual to most people, but they were to Americans certainly then, and they were a lot to us and everybody who ate them. And that was fun. That was really, really fun.
How did you sort of get out of that, conventional vegetarian cooking? Like, what was it? Travel that introduced you to other ways of cooking vegetables, or was it like the farms that informed that?
Well, I didn't really get to travel until after I had left Greens. I think working at Chez Panisse probably was very seminal and important for me because I saw, vegetables in a totally different light. I mean, they really liked them, and that was impressive to me. I did go to France before starting Greens, but that was the only traveling I had ever done. How did I get out of that thing, that vegetarian thing? I think just by reading. I mean, I was a voracious reader, and I was so excited, and I didn't bring them with me, but I have notebooks at home that are filled still with ideas of food to make, and they weren't necessarily my ideas. They were just things I had gleaned from reading other people, and everybody was so excited about the change, the sea change that was coming in food, I think, at that time.
Yeah, you talk about cooking foods from cookbooks that you had never tried before, like from, countries that you had never visited yourself. And so you didn't really know what the dishes were supposed to taste like. And I just really loved that and could relate to this idea of, learning to cook and just not quite knowing what the thing is supposed to taste like. So I was kind of wondering, when you were first starting to look through those cookbooks, how did you decide what to cook? And was it, what sounded interesting to you, what you had, or what sounded challenging? I'm just wondering, like, how your mind is working. Yeah.
All of those things, or what's just sounded intriguing, like I have to try that, or this would work, or this would be something we could do. Or if I'd look at a French recipe and it was à la forestière or something, I knew that there was a mushroom component I could pull out and work with. And that became the mushroom ragu, which now we think of as very ordinary, but then it was an adventure. All this food was a big adventure.
As I was reading this, I was just thinking about how you're such a model of, I think, curiosity and open-heartedness, and I kind of look to as like a person who embraces new things and isn't so like fixed in their ways. And I was thinking about how this book is really wonderful in that it shows how food can like enlarge a person's world and shake up old ways of thinking and prejudices. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, and where do you think that came from? Like this openness and curiosity.
Well, I don't know exactly where it came from, but I do feel it's so important for us to break bread together and to sit around a table together. In fact, during the pandemic, what I've really, really missed, especially during lockdown, is being with other people and inviting people over and having a meal together. But I do know that if you call yourself this or that, if you're vegan or keto or whatever, even vegetarian, you know, it's going to make it very hard to say, oh, I'd love some, and sit down at the table and thank your hosts or your hostess and just enjoy what they've eaten. And I feel that we lose a lot by that. So to me, nourishment is about the person. It's not so much about whether this or that isn't in your food, you know. So the last chapter is about nourishment. And that's finally when I recall a lot of food things that I recall, that I actually remember because of the kindness involved, or the generosity, or the care, or whatever it was. It has nothing to do with whether or not there's meat on the plate, or it's GMO or it's not. And, you know, I mean, I realize we live in a dangerous world, and you might want to protect yourself, but to me, social intercourse is more important. It's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was, you know, really responding to, is that I think, especially lately, we're thinking so much about just how divided the country is and how rigid people can be. And I think there are a lot of people who would maybe go to a table and refuse food, right? And it seems like in your life, you've been all about the opposite, just being like, yes, I will eat this, even though I don't really care for X thing. Yeah, where do you think, where does that come from?
I don't know. I really don't know where it comes from. I mean, I when you were asking, I'm thinking, does it come from my parents? I don't think so. You know, I don't think so. I don't know where it comes from. It's just who I am, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Something else that I really liked about this book was I think your life story really showcases the fact that, you know, for most people, I think life isn't planned out. You know, you don't have an idea of how you want your life to turn out from the beginning. And in your life in particular, you've really stumbled into a lot of what happens next for you. I think that was true with, you know, cooking at the Zen Center, and then Greens, and then the Greens cookbook. And so I'm wondering, what was it like to put this book together? Like all of those disparate moments and chapters of your life, and what was it like to create a whole narrative around it? And maybe also, like, what were some themes that stuck out to you?
That's a writer's question. And I know you're a writer and you've written a cookbook too, but I don't know, with this book, I just started, and it was, I mean, I'd worked on it for so many years, and there were chapters when I'd read them out loud, I was so sick of reading them that I just decided I'm going to get rid of them. And I told my editor that. She said, oh, let me see them. And she said, these are good, they should stay in. And I don't know exactly that I did it in the way you're talking about, you know, as a conscious narrative choice. But I have the copy of the book with me right here, but I can't look through it really to tell you how I did it. It took so long, you know, it was really so piecemeal. And yeah, it was pretty piecemeal, like my life.
I wonder if we could talk a little bit about like going back to like starting and learning how to cook from cookbooks and at the Zen Center, what was the process like of learning to trust your own intuition in the kitchen, and then finally like creating your own recipes for?
Gosh, I don't know. I feel like I'm such a self-taught cook, you know, but I did begin looking in through cookbooks. And at that time in 1970, there was very, very little. There were no Italian books. There were French books. They were very classic, like Escoffier, you know, but there wasn't a lot to look at. And one of the things that really inspired me was Craig Claiborne's New York Times cookbook, because it's the first time that he brought cuisines from immigrant people in our country to the fore. And they were also related, you know, the dishes were. So I could make spanakopita, but I could also make something that would go with it. So it wasn't a mishmash of things from around the world, which I really didn't want to do. I don't know. When I started to trust myself, I don't know, maybe at Greens, maybe beforehand. I feel like I'm just learning about being a cook now, you know, because my husband partly says, oh, you're so fast, you do this, you do that. And he loves to say, yes, chef, you know, to me when he's working in the kitchen. But I realized that part of the dynamic of cooking is seeing a whole world and putting it together and moving fast through it, or moving quickly and with intention. And although that's not always true, one of my favorite cooks, David Tanis, is not that way at all. He kind of muddles around and does a little of this and that, and he comes up with a fantastic dish. But I'm not that way. And I think a lot of people who do cook are not that way. I think we're more speedy people. You know, when we open the oven, we know we're losing heat. So we want to do what we have to do and close it right away, you know, which is different than, oh, I think I'll go here or I'll do this, you know, which is what I have at home a lot.
Something else I really liked about this book, I'm just going to keep talking about things I liked, was again this like reminder of just the miracle of food and how yeah, kind of amazing it is. And I think the pandemic for me has, you know, reminded me of things that I have in the past taken for granted, like traveling, going to restaurants, just sharing food with friends. And we talked a little bit about the fact that there's so much more available now in terms of produce, and you have this great respect for farmers and a great interest in the people who grow and raise our food. And the book also talks a lot about just the gratitude for the people who have made meals for you in the past and taught you things. So I'm wondering if we could talk just a little bit about gratitude in your life and, you know, your vegetable life.
My vegetable life. That's pretty much my life, you know. I mean, a memoir is supposed to be a slice of your life. This is a rather large slice, I must say. But yeah, gratitude. I feel that for vegetables actually a lot. I mean, especially now that it's winter here and there's not a lot growing. I mean, even my chard is kind of wilted, and, you know, I picked up all my carrots, and some of them are huge and some of them are small, and I have a CSA and it comes on Thursday. So I just got it today. And, you know, there's a few shriveled things in it and beans. But, you know, this is winter and I've never had a CSA before. And it really is teaching me about how incredibly limited our pantries are, even though I knew that before. I told Patrick tonight when we were cooking this fennel dish, I said, you know, I used to put a lot of saffron in there because I think saffron and fennel really work well together. And, but I haven't had saffron for quite a while. And it seems like such a luxury to somehow go out and buy another jar of saffron that I haven't done it. And I see diminishing on a lot of fronts, you know, actually. And so for what I do have to cook with, I am very grateful for. And I'm very grateful that I know how to cook and that I've written recipes and that it all works together. But like a lot of people, I get tired of it too. I had a Christmas present last night that was actually recalking the sink in the kitchen. And but then as the guy was leaving, he said, "You can't use the sink." And I thought, oh, great, pizza. We'll go up and get a pizza. So I understand it when people say they're tired of it, especially women.
What do you do when you're tired of cooking? And especially now, because I think a lot of people, including me, are tired of cooking.
Well, you don't have a choice. I mean, you know, I make a lot of soup. Sometimes we just have soup for dinner, or if I get salad and the CSA, we'll have that. We'll eat very simply. I do find it helps to have certain things you do. Like usually on Thursdays, I get the CSA, we get a pizza. On Fridays, we always have baked potatoes. Baked potato night. I mean, who knew? I didn't grow up with baked potatoes, but my husband loves them. And so we do that. And honestly, I'm kind of relieved when Friday night comes because I know we're going to have a baked potato and we're going to have horseradish and chipotle mayo and various things with it. But it helps to know what you're going to do, I find, for the first time.
I'm curious about your baked potato toppings.
They're very minimal. Well, one is chipotle mayonnaise, which I learned from a friend. And it's just mayonnaise with a lot of chipotle and lime and garlic in it. And it's really, really good. Or butter, or, you know, I mean, sometimes it's bacon, but mostly it's not. And, you know, I mean, that's up to Patrick. I don't really care. Butter, sour cream, yogurt, we put all those things out, scallions. We don't have chives this time of year, and I refuse to buy those little things that are watered in coffins and, you know. But if you have a better idea for toppings, please tell me. Anybody can tell me.
Yeah, put it in the chat if you have favorite.
Yeah, favorite toppings, I'd love to know.
We can shake it up. I would love to talk about the chapter in the book, the final chapter that you mentioned, that's called Nourishment, about all the memorable meals that you've had in your life. And you talk about how it's necessarily the fanciest or the most delicious, but it's these meals that really stick with you after all these years.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It really made me think of some of my own, but I wondered if you could talk about a couple of those meals and maybe talk about what they have in common with each other, like what you decided makes for a memorable meal.
Sure. I mean, I've read a number of these meals before, so I remember them. One was a meal that I was sent back with from Chez Panisse from a visit to Berkeley. Alice had made me a lunch to bring back, and I didn't eat it until I got to Needles, California, and I checked into a Motel 6, and it was really, really hot out, but I had this little lunch and that she had made, and it was kind of wilted by then, but it didn't matter. It was so delicious, and she had made it for me, and I don't exactly remember everything that was in it, but but now I always stay at that motel if I can, and I pull up that little wooden table and I set my cloth or whatever I have out. And, it changed that part of my life for me. Another was with this cowboy, Ernie Macy, who I knew in Flagstaff. And I knew him because I wanted to learn to barrel race, and he had a couple of horses, and we'd go riding together. So one day he invited me to lunch, and I didn't really want to go. It was so hot, and I had friends coming over, and I was full, but I went. And he made steak, a big steak from the supermarket, which is something I would never have bought. I wouldn't know what to choose. I wouldn't want to eat it. And it was fried in salad oil, another thing I didn't eat. And he served it with a zucchini that had cooked for about 45 minutes and a stick of margarine, which I didn't eat. And it was actually delicious because it really tasted like squash. And I was so impressed with the lunch. It was fine. It was really good. And I told him, and he just beamed. He was so happy. And everything I had to do got done. Yes, I was a little full, but that's okay. I've been full before, you just eat it, I guess. And so those are two. And a third is actually in this house I'm in right now, which is not my own. It belongs to some friends of mine. And he is a Hopi Indian named Philip Tuwalasia. And I had gone to Chaco Canyon to a conference, and the governor of one of the Hopi villages asked me to give him a ride, and it was snowing and muddy, and I gave him a ride. And he invited me into his house, and I thought, oh, I'm finally going to have some real Indian food. And he got a hamburger out of the freezer and fried it and put it on a bun and a liter of Coke or something. And it was very disappointing, but it was also quite wonderful. And then afterwards, he said, I want you to take a pot, and I did. And it turns out that Philip, who lives here, whose house this is, and Judy Tuwalasia, it turns out it was his aunt who had made the pot. And I mean, I'm just so happy to have that connection. And I wouldn't have had it if I had said, oh, I don't want the hamburger, thank you, it's meat. I just wouldn't. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying, is that it's so cool that you just say yes to these things, even if you know that you don't really like steak that much, or maybe you're not a Coke fan, but just saying yes, I think leads to these beautiful moments, and ultimately like really memorable moments too.
Yeah, I mean, these are old memories. I mean, they're very old, but they're there. I remember them. And I think that's what I was looking for, is what do I remember? And I'm not talking, and I didn't want to talk about 3-star meals and French restaurants in France, because they're meant to shock and awe, and they're wonderful and they're impressive, but that's not what it was about.
Yeah. I wonder if, for me, actually, I remember meals that people cook for me more than I remember the meals that I cook for myself or for my family. I wonder if that's true for you. I also remember the really bad meals that I cook, because those I just am, I can't stop thinking about my own failures.
Oh yeah, well, we all have those. Wait till you have a restaurant, then you really have failures, and people are eating your failures and they're paying money and you're feeling terrible, but you want to go out and apologize to everybody as they come in, but you can't, and they may have a very different experience of food than you do in a restaurant, because they're sitting down, they're calm, they're cool, it's evening, they're looking at the bridge, the sunset, whatever, at Greens. You're in the kitchen, you're hot, you've been working since morning, you're tired, and you're not sure what you're doing, and it's a very different experience. So one of the things I did at Greens is I made myself eat in the dining room on occasion, because I felt that was the only way that you could actually see how things taste, and are they boring to eat after a while, or do they hold up, or how can you make it better? And actually it was a very good thing to do, and it taught me a lot.
So I have a couple more questions, but I want to remind everybody to ask your questions in the Q&A feature of this Zoom, and I'll look at them a little bit later. But you write in the book that after In My Kitchen, which is your most recent cookbook, you say that you're done now, done with cookbooks, I guess. And I guess I don't really think of you as a person who retires. So I'm wondering, how can you be so sure, and what are you interested in lately?
Well, I am pretty sure. I mean, I mean, as sure as I can be. We say these things and then we change. I do realize that. But what am I interested in now? In grain, in growing grain and milling it and baking with it. And that's been a really exciting phenomena for me of late. And gardening. In fact, since I've been home for the last, 9 or 10 months or so, that's all I've done is work in my garden. Mainly digging up the things that I planted for writing vegetable literacy that went to seed and took over and that I don't really, really want in the garden. And in fact, I did a grain patch this year, and I'll see what it yields in the spring or the summer.
What are you growing?
What am I growing in the grain?
In the grains.
Let's see, that was a mixture of wheat and rye, of red fife wheat and rye. And I just happened to have it, and I threw it in because I didn't think it was so great to mix those grains to cook with. But I'll be able to tell the difference when they come up. And it's partly a ground cover too, to nourish the soil and give it something to do, until next year. In my vegetable garden, like I said, everything is gone now, pretty much. I'm not a farmer. I'm just a person, who grows. In fact, all of us who are involved with the Rio Grande grain team and who went to grain school, none of us are farmers. And we all want to say, okay, we're not farmers. We need a farmer. We need to figure out what's going to work here in New Mexico. That's going to bring more than a few dollars, change to a farmer who undertakes to grow and clean and sell his grain. It's hard work. It really is.
Yeah, I visited you in your home in New Mexico when I wrote an article about you for Lucky Peach, and I don't actually remember what season that was, but I remember it was sort of a similar situation. The chard was not looking great, and it was sort of the end of the season, and you also didn't have that much in the fridge. I don't know if you remember this, but you had some sunchokes that you had dug up. And then you cooked it for us, and it was sauteed. It was so good that I ate a lot of them. And I still tell that story because I had a very difficult night. And I think, when I saw you the next morning, the first thing you said was, "I'm so sorry. I forgot."
Yeah, sunchokes, they're one of the vegetables I was digging up during the, lockdown.
Yeah.
Now I think I have none. Now I wish I had a few, but you can't have a few. It's either a lot or none.
Right. But you should only eat them in moderation. Otherwise,
sunchokes can be a problem.
Yes. So something that you told me actually the first time that we met, and that I still think about a lot, is you said to celebrate everything. And I think you're talking about the writing process, especially like when it comes to books can take such a long time, and there are so many different stages of writing a book, and it can be so long and solitary, and you might think you're done, but then you're not done. And so to just celebrate every stage of it, and it's something that I just have hung on to, and that I try to do myself, even though I forget about it a lot. But I was wondering if you've been able to celebrate this book adequately, and how you're celebrating, and what else are you celebrating during this pandemic?
Oh, I don't know that I'm celebrating much during the pandemic, but I did celebrate this book. I mean, by that I meant when you turn it in, open some champagne. Have a really special thing. When you get it back, do the same thing, and keep on doing that, because there's never a moment when it's done, really, it's finished. I mean, there is sort of a moment when it's out of print, maybe, but, and I suppose we should celebrate that too, but I don't know. I haven't done that yet. But yes, it is important. And what I celebrate and what I appreciate right now is just being alive and being in this village where I live, and with my husband and friends. And it's been okay, actually, staying home. But I do watch, the news every night, and I read the paper, and I get a lot of stuff online. I know it's really hard for a lot of people. And so I cook for some people who need some help.
Yeah.
The only thing I can do, really.
So I'm going to go to some audience questions, and again, feel free to just type them out in the Q&A box. But we have a few from Nikki Warner. One is, what did you have for breakfast
this morning? Let's see.
Yes.
I had a piece of bread that my husband had made, actually, and that was with red fife wheat and with dark black Tibetan barley, and with avocado on it, which I have eaten since for the last 40 years or so, mashed in with a little lemon and salt and pepper. That's what I had. That's my usual breakfast.
Avocado toast before it was cool.
Oh yeah, way before it was cool. I used to have it in college. I mean, I went to UC Santa Cruz, you know, and we had lots of avocados, and and now I've paid $18 for avocado toast because it has pickles on it or something. Oh yeah. It needn't be fancy.
So Nikki also asks, I loved your book, Literacy. What is the favorite thing you've got growing in your garden now? I guess we sort of covered that, but.
Well, it was chard, it was carrots, and before that it was tomatoes. But I mean, you know, I am a seasonal cook, and right now there's very little in my garden. I hadn't planted the garden with the pandemic in mind, actually, because you have to start early, you know, and our seasons are very different from California's, you know. Our tomato, pepper, eggplant season is about 3 weeks long, if we get it at all. And, you know, so it's just very, very different gardening here. And you have to really plan it and think it out. And thank God for the farmers, because that's what they do. And otherwise I could be getting turnips out of my garden too. And maybe next year I will. I don't know. We'll see.
Diane Cowdrey, I hope I'm saying that right, asks, what are your easy and quick meals to make?
Oh, easy and quick? I don't know. I mean, because I can cook, I can make I've been making a winter squash gratin with caramelized onions, which I actually do find very easy, but I think a beginning cook might not find it so easy. I mean, because you have to caramelize the onions, you have to, you know, brown the squash, you have to cut things up, you have to make breadcrumbs, but if you cook already, it's not a big deal. But I would suggest you try it. It's a really good gratin, and it'll go far for your family. And if you're just 2 people, you can cut a recipe in half. That's what I do all the time now. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what else that I do that's easy. Baked potatoes are really easy. You just put them in the oven and there they go. Put them in the toaster oven, turn it on. An hour later, they're done. You know, salad. Cabbages, winter cabbage salad, January salad, which is in vegetable literacy. I love that salad. It's cabbage and lettuce and just things you have around, basically, you know. But well, I could go into vegetable literacy, but this book is not about recipes and it's not about ease or any of that. But we have polenta. We make pasta, you know, with a lot of vegetables. And find those things fairly easy, you know. And now that it's cold, gratins and stews are very good. Soups are excellent and easy, fast to do. They really, really are. Don't you think?
I think that's, yeah, and I think it's great that your cookbooks have become more and more simple, right? You talk about that in the book. As time goes on, you're really looking for ways to simplify. So I think that question, Diane, you know, could look in books like In My Kitchen or The New Vegetarian Cooking for Everyone, have a lot of very simplified recipes.
I think one of the reasons they've gotten simpler is because our ingredients have gotten so much better too. I mean, in The Savory Way, in my first books, I had to combine vinegars and things to get the balance I wanted. Now we have a lot of different vinegars, especially if you live in a place like the Bay Area, you can get these things and you can make them simpler. You really can. It's not so hard to do. It's not that I figured out how to make them simpler. It's just the ingredients helped me a lot.
Carla Payton asks, what area of the world are you interested in exploring as far as their food culture?
Interesting question, because, you know, I mean, wow, I've lived in Italy. I love Italy. I would love to explore the whole country again from head to toe, really. But the Middle Eastern recipes appeal to me a lot. That's sort of my home food in a way. Because I partly because I grew up in California, and I think we had that same climate. Ireland, I've lived in Ireland. I've visited many times. I've had different kinds of experiences of food in Ireland, from the best to the worst. But it's a very meat intensive culture, and that's when it gets good, unfortunately. Although the best meal I had in Ireland was a vegetarian meal in County Cork, and it really, at Cafe Paradiso, and it really surprised me so much. It was so complex and balanced and good. Yeah, I know that's not answering your question because I don't really know the answer, but I think Southern Italy, Sicily, Sardinia, that area of the world. And then beyond, if I could go beyond, I would love to Middle Eastern countries.
Someone asks, Susan Stover asks, we're big fans and grow beans, beans. Talk about your favorite beans and bean recipes.
It's funny you mentioned beans because I just got beans today in my CSA box. I know they're getting desperate, but I love beans. And my husband has not loved beans, and he's trying to. So that's really put a damper on my cooking beans. But recently, I did cook some piquito beans, which are a bean from here. They happened before the pinto bean came in, the pinquitos, and I mixed them with red chili sauce, and I had them over rice tonight at dinner, and they were delicious. They were so good. But I love beans. I love them in soups. You know, barlotti beans, I adore. Susan, what kind of beans do you grow? I'm curious.
We can wait for Susan to chat her answer. In the meantime, where is your favorite place to eat local? And what
Locally, we haven't had a place. I mean, I live in the nowhere, you know, and I mean, El Dorado, which is a 20-minute drive away, has a restaurant called Arable. And I appreciate Arable because it uses local foods, you know, from vegetables to meats. But they've also not been open. And so it's been hard to go. In Santa Fe, I love La Boca, which is a Spanish restaurant, and it's so good. But we haven't been for a year either.
This is a funny question from an anonymous attendee. Why is the name of the book An Onion in My Pocket while the cover picture has carrots?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good point. I can answer the first part of the question, but I can't put the two together. The onion in my pocket was real. I mean, that was a real story. I went to Spanish class and I had an onion in my pocket, and I put it on the desk to get my pens and pencils out. And this was just a year ago. And I had an onion in my pocket because I'd been cooking with somebody and the onions were left, and I had brought them, and I thought, oh, this is a beautiful onion. I'm going to take it home and do something with it. So that led to the introduction of the book. But this picture with the carrots that's on the front, me, Statue of Liberty, I didn't even grow those carrots. I don't, it's just a snapshot my husband took, and the editor liked it and she put it there. That's all I can say. I don't get to necessarily choose these things.
I thought it was a good companion to your dominatrix vegetarian for one spoon. So there's also like a very strong.
I guess it is, isn't it?
Carla Payton asks, do you use the following kitchen items? Sous vide, Instapot, or slow cooker?
No, I don't. I don't have them. I have a tiny kitchen. Rachel can tell you. It's really small. It's a one-person kitchen. I don't have room to put those things anyplace. So I don't. I do use a pressure cooker for certain things. Some beans, maybe, if they're not really big, you know, time important beans that are very expensive. Those I might just braise in the oven very slowly. Sous vide, no, I don't. I'll go to a restaurant for that. Thank you. Sorry.
So we do have a bean answer.
Deborah. Oh, good.
Susan grows 10 to 15 varieties of beans. They're in the chat, but this seems very cool. Susan, can we buy your beans? We can go on to a couple more questions by Nikki. Have you cooked other people's recipes lately? If so, anyone in particular that stands out?
Oh yeah, I cook a lot from Yotam Ottolenghi, whose recipes I like very much. I cook a lot from Paul Wolfert's old books, especially Mediterranean Grains and Greens, which I love. And who else am I cooking from? I don't know, David Tanis. I have a lot of books out right now on the floor of our living room because my husband wants to cook, and so he's looking through them for ideas. Daniel Boulou, sometimes I'll cook from. Various people, you know, and also my own cookbooks, but I do use other people's cookbooks. I like to use other people's cookbooks. I love to use a recipe that I don't understand. And then you have to follow it to understand it, why it makes sense, and if it does.
Another anonymous person asks, did you connect with lots of people from your past when writing the book?
I've connected more since writing the book. In fact, this very week, I've had emails from two people who said, I also grew up in Cornell, you know, but a little bit after you. We lived in married student housing. My father was getting his PhD, you know, and my mother was difficult too, and she was very smart, but she didn't care about cooking. So, I mean, somebody else wrote and pointed out some similarities in our lives, and mainly having to do with the living in Delano and the United Farm Workers. So I've connected with people more since writing the book, since the book is out, than I did when I was writing it.
I'm curious if you showed, you know, people like Dan and Patrick drafts before you were.
Oh, I showed it to them, but I mean, not to get so much to get their comments, you know, although Dan said, you make me sound like I just love chili. And I said, well, you do, you know, but it's true. I mean, he's broadened his palate some, so I rewrote that, you know, and I hope that that's reflected. And Patrick right now is listening to the book on tape, and so he's actually read it before, but he's still finding things and saying, I didn't know about that. And I said, well, you read the book, it was there, you know, so there you go. But that's all.
Thank you both so much. That was such a fascinating conversation, and I'm sure all of us have a few ideas of what to cook in the coming weeks.
Baked potatoes.
Baked potatoes, and some of the people who commented on what they put on it sounds great. So
I didn't see that.
There was two. One from Cheryl. She likes Greek yogurt, feta, lemon, and garlic. Which sounds delicious. And Nikki, garlicky mushrooms and caramelized onions.
Those do sound good. Thank you both for your suggestions, and I will follow them.
And for all of you wondering, yes, this is being recorded, and I will be following up via email tomorrow with all the information, where to buy and how to get your signed book plate from Deborah, which will only be available through our Petaluma and Montgomery Village, Santa Rosa stores. I will include the phone numbers you can call, we'll mail it to you. If you've already purchased the book and would like a book plate, I will have info for you as well. So thank you to both of you. And I just want to leave, if any last comments you want to make before we kind of sign off here.
Yes, I do. I want to say thank you so much, and to everybody, to Rachel, to you, Jamie, and to the audience, and especially those who buy books and support the bookstore, because I think independent bookstores are so important.
Thank you so much. How about you, Rachel? Any last thoughts? Don't want to cut you off.
No, just the same thing. Yeah, support independent bookstores. We want them to survive this pandemic.
Awesome. And this is our last event before next year. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, anything to kind of get us excited for this coming year. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining, and hope to have you back in person soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.